A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions that could be hard for some people to hear, so please take care when you're listening. When you look at the research behind the global misinformation campaign, it's because they want to get mums, because mums are the ones primarily making the health decisions. So if they can turn the mums, then they can, get their point across, which is to undermine public health effectively.
Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Down come baby, cradling on.
Kia ora, no mai, haere mai, and welcome back to Tell Me About It, the podcast where we're taking down the patriarchy one episode at a time.
Yes, we are.
No better way to spend a morning. I'm so glad we're back. I'm Noelle McCarthy.
I'm Michelle Duff.
And I'm Kirsty Johnston.
So we're back from our break and cracking straight into it with something that is on everyone's minds at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, this week we're talking about what it's like to watch people you care about fall down the rabbit hole of misinformation.
So we're going to talk about what's been happening over the past couple of years around the world where people have been believing false or misleading information on social media and on sort of fake news websites.
Yeah, Michelle, I feel like we've seen so many recent examples of this overseas, with Donald Trump's presidency in America and the lead up to his election, and also, of course, recently in Ukraine, where so many Russian people are being told things that aren't real, but mostly, of course, everywhere, all over the world, in the anti-vaccine movement.
Yeah, and I think that we have seen it from afar. We've seen this happening over in the States and we've read about it, but now only recently we're seeing it here, and it's really impacting us. I've had friends I've known for 30 years accusing me as a journalist of being paid by Jacinda Ardern to spread her message.
That's rough, being accused of that by your friend. What was that like, Michelle?
Oh, well, it's happened more than once, and it's not a fun time. I mean, it's kind of like I just think, what are you talking about? I mean, you know me and you know my word. Do you really think my conscience can be brought?
It's all linked to broader misinformation campaigns, right, that are designed to kind of polarize people and, I guess, destabilize democracy. It's not just about vaccines, but they are the latest iteration of it. I mean, if it wasn't COVID, I think it'd be something else where they're just propagating these untrue ideas. And I think that it was really obvious, this was on most obvious display at the occupation of Parliament, where there were signs everywhere displaying patently wrong information about the vaccines, right next to other signs being hang the Prime Minister for treason.
You're right next to each other, eh? As if there's nothing, nothing to see here. We're just friendly people.
I saw that on the back of vans, down by the law school. I was walking up from the train station and call me naive, but I really was quite shocked to see that. I know both of you, have a lot more exposure to what's going on in the world in real time on a daily basis, because you both work in news. Were you shocked to see that? Did you, Michelle and Kirsty, did you know that this stuff was out there?
I think we've both been following, the rise of information and the sort of undercurrent of misogyny and hatred that's behind it for quite a while, eh, Kirsty?
The rise of misinformation, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, what did I say?
The rise of information.
Oh, no.
Which can also be problematic, but not as problematic as misinformation.
The rise of lies and fabrications.
Yeah, and it's not just, misogyny, it's Islamophobia. It's this entire soupy mess of imported alt-right politics, and we feel like it's a feminist issue, of course, but we'll talk about that. But I mean, yeah, I do think that seeing it overseas and then seeing it in your own backyard is completely different. I mean, Michelle, you went down to the occupation on the day that police cleared it and there were those huge riots. What was it like? What was it like down there?
It was crazy enough to watch it on telly. I mean, to watch the slide in the playground burning and all those tents on fire. I can't imagine, Michelle, what it would have been like to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I was compelled to go, to be honest. I was meant to be doing some other story, but I was watching the live stream, both the, I'm going to say reality-based media rather than mainstream media. live stream.
Like that designation, yeah, useful, helpful.
And some of the other ones, by some of those like misinformation peddlers. And I was just like, the difference between them and the way that they were actually distorting reality in real time was so alarming. And I just thought, I need to be there and I need to, see what's happening and do what I can actually to do my job and bring, what's happening back to people.
And just to be clear, when you say misinformation peddlers, the ones you're talking about in this context were people who were live streaming from the occupation, who were down there the day of the riots, part of the riots, starting the riots, those people.
Despite seeing with their own eyes and it being recorded on camera, protesters lighting fires, they started spreading rumours that it was the police who did it or other left-wing activists, which was patently not true. It's like a wholesale denial of reality, which I actually think that you've sort of seen that in your reporting too, Kirsty?
Yeah, kind of in a different way. Like I spent months, way too long for my mental health, watching wellness influencers on Instagram. And over that time, I saw them kind of grow increasingly, I guess, emboldened in their willingness to promote anti-vax ideals, to promote these ideas that vaccines are somehow toxic or harm babies. And to see them, I was watching them try and convince their followers effectively not to get vaccinated.
It's so disturbing, just the way women have been weaponized to make this information palatable. The soft sort of mum vibe of someone just wanting to take care of their kids. And, you saw that I really feel like that came through in that story you wrote, Kirsty. And also just sometimes, at the protest as well, the way that kids were sort of down there, like it was a whole family, family sort of event, the way that was presented.
Yeah, and it's deliberate. All those images that you see on Instagram of a pregnant woman or a very wholesome, usually white woman holding a perfect, baby, and then the imagery or the message with the imagery is vaccines will kill you, or are you sure the vaccine's safe? And the reason that they're doing that is when you look at the research behind the global misinformation campaign, it's because they want to get mums, because mums are the ones primarily making the health decisions. So if they can turn the mums, then they can, get their point across, which is to undermine public health effectively.
And they do that by, as you say, Kirsty, by tapping into their anxieties. Now, I know that our guest today is going to talk about that, that targeting of women and why it is a feminist issue, as you say. And we're really thrilled to have Anke Richter with us, a journalist who's been reporting on cults for years. She has a book coming out very soon about cults, and she's been through the experience of watching people she knows be sucked into these sorts of worlds many times. And she's now set up an activist group targeting misinformation, and she's going to talk to us today about the parallels that she sees between the world of cults and the anti-vax movement, because they're there. So welcome to you. Thank you so much for being our guest this morning, Anke.
Oh, kia ora, Noelle. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, Anke, I really want to know, in your opinion, is the anti-vax movement, is that a kind of cult?
I probably wouldn't have said this 2 years ago because I actually didn't know that much about it. I always knew that they were wrong, what they're stating, but I didn't really understand how cultic it is, and not just in how it affects people, but how it's actually orchestrated and run. So that's only become more clear to me over those last 2 years, and by working with people in the anti-misinformation space and in this group that we started called Fact Aotearoa. There's some people who've been watching the anti-vax movements for years and years and years, and they really understand a lot more about it. And it's there are people really pushing misinformation, paying others to spread it. From Andrew Wakefield, who's right at the heart of it all with his false autism claims, and then there are a lot of peddlers of supplements and whatnot, and quote unquote wellness products that they all have some kind of financial or commercial interest to get people against the vaccine and pro what they're peddling. So I totally see it as a cult, even though there isn't just one, there isn't one guru and there isn't one group that you join. It doesn't actually work like that in general with cults. Anyway, yeah.
When we talked, Anke, you talked about how sex and power and money are often the most important dynamics when it comes to cults. What are the dynamics and the parallel dynamics that you're seeing in the anti-vaccine movement?
Oh, well, maybe the sex not so much, but if you could transfer that to imagery and looks and Instagram influencers and all that. So, but let's put that aspect aside. But definitely power and money. I think it's more the belonging side. It's finding a home for people who've been disenfranchised. So if you look at why does someone who's a normal person, isn't necessarily conspiratorial or into wacky beliefs for starters, but maybe has a little child, takes them to the clinic, gets the vaccination, maybe child gets a fever the next day, mum is very worried, calls the health helpline or whatever, calls the nurses, maybe gets a dismissive answer, maybe she gets treated like she's hysterical and whatnot, and suddenly she has fear and she thinks, oh my God, no one's really taking me seriously, but I'm worried about my child. And along comes an anti-vax friend, and she's welcomed with open arms. And there's a whole group of people who want to talk to her about it, who understand her worries, and who have an answer and a solution. That's how it starts, and that's how cults work. And even if it's not deliberate love bombing and recruitment and putting out misinformation, even if it's not done deliberately by people who are more at the bottom of that pyramid, it still works even indirectly, that you fall into something that helps you at first, that makes a lot of sense, that maybe is good for you even. Right? If you do some self-help programs and yoga and whatnot. So there are a lot of parallels in terms of a lot of good people end up in these spaces.
Anke, I find it really interesting to hear you characterize it like that. And because I have seen, many people that I know and love, and I think we all have at this point actually, and who we sort of think, should know better, being kind of sucked down these rabbit holes. So what I'm sort of hearing you say is that, it's often that these people sort of feel like forgotten, or that they haven't been listened to, or, I guess you can kind of understand if you've, not been sure about being vaccinated and then lost your job and then, that kind of thing, how someone reaching out and saying, oh, hey, we're in the same spot, how that could be really intoxicating.
It is, and people need support, and they're all isolated already because we're in a pandemic, we've had lockdowns, everyone's on social media, so you're already in our world today, you're already more susceptible to landing in an echo chamber where that becomes your one and all, and where you feel seen and heard. Whereas when you lose touch with reality and the actual world out there, where you just go down and see your GP and talk to your local nurse, or to your friend in the coffee shop. No, you end up in this parallel universe that gives you all the answers and all the support and all the love, and that's the cultic dynamic. And I totally agree with you, Michelle. It's how do we stay compassionate to what's playing out there and why that happens? Because it can actually happen to all of us. I mean, we're kind of inoculated because we're all journalists, okay? That helps. And I'm married to a doctor. I guess that helps as well. We kind of get it that the media is not lying to us because we work in the media. And I know that doctors are not out there to kill us because I live with one and I trust him. So we're very privileged in that way, but not everyone is. And I think we always have to remind ourselves that we all have an Achilles heel where something can land. No one's immune to that. So this is why I'm always really careful not to shame and mock and blame people who've fallen for the information. But then when does the victim of that misinformation become the perpetrator, right? When are they actually causing harm, and not just harm by not wanting to get vaccinated? You could say, yeah, that is causing harm because for the greater good, they're not doing the right thing, but they would say, oh, it's just my individual choice. Okay, I can kind of live with it, even though I don't quite agree with it. But what about those who are actively driving those narratives, who are monetizing them? And we will know their names. We know who they are. Kirsty and Michelle, you've done great work, around all this. And we need to point at them and hold them accountable while we're not kicking down at those who have fallen for their spiel and under their spell. And it's a fine line to walk, and I don't always get it right.
That's an issue though, Anke, isn't it? In terms of, like, you've also got the issue of the platforms that they are using, the places where these communications are happening, because there's no accountability there. Governments have sort of made half-hearted, you could argue, attempts to try to bring Facebook to heel, but it's not working.
It's not working, and I mean, I'm a hypocrite because the first group that I helped to start is this Facebook group called Rabbit Hole Resistance. So that's not an activist group, but it's a support group for people who are concerned about their friends and whānau who've fallen down the rabbit hole. So it's a really compassionate, supportive space. It is really tricky. How do we shut down what needs to be shut down and push against it and call it out? But we do it also in the media outlets that we work for, which we know are not the ones that the people who should follow them are following. Yeah, we're not. They watch Counterspin, and we talk on Radio New Zealand and on this podcast and and stuff and the spin-off. So I've been watching this train wreck of a shit show, outside Parliament for the last weeks, and I was in utter despair. And I was just, this is just tragic. So it wasn't, and then seeing the violence of the, whatever we're going to call it, Riot Wednesday or Ash Wednesday or Battle of Portaloo, as someone called it, I can't even really get upset about the violence on the street so much. I mean, I'm from Europe, it's not so shocking for me to see police violence and riots. What's far more shocking, concerning for me is the overlap of what you pointed out earlier of peace, love, and kumbaya next to let's hang Jacinda Ardern and swastikas, and that kind of outright fascist propaganda. The hippie friends on my Facebook that I've seen spouting the Nuremberg Code, which is complete. It's completely insane to start with because it doesn't apply. It's not a thing. But what it actually means, it's outright fascist. It advocates for hanging journalists and doctors and politicians and scientists because we're all out to kill the population with vaccinations, right? So that's the violence that I'm really, really concerned about. And this is why, the group that I'm doing a bit of media work for, Fact Out at All, we send this appeal out to the protest organizers where we actually said, you need to denounce that. If you, especially those who are running the pro-fest, the more sort of the hippie festival, music festival side of things, if you stand there with outright fascists and neo-Nazis and you're not denouncing their violence, if you keep spreading the same messages as Counterspin, you're guilty for what, you're in the same boat with them. So that's kind of what I'm pointing at. So I know everyone was shocked to see what happened on the Wednesday and all the fires and whatnot. Yes, it's crass, but that's just the outer. It's almost like it's just the outer layer of what's happening inside people's heads, and that's actually for me far more of a worry than a fire that could luckily. I mean, we were lucky; no one get killed. Yeah, but what about the mass psychosis that is playing out? What about all these disenfranchised, frustrated, angry, beaten down, misinformed people, possibly sick with COVID, half of them, coming home, not only infecting their communities with Omicron, but just as bad, spreading the infodemic that they're so entrenched in. That's really, it's kind of like a call out now, I think, to psychologists, to people in this field who need to take this more seriously than we have in the past. Because to be honest, I think we've been very complacent here in Aotearoa. We've been, we've had it pretty sweet. We had almost 2 COVID-free years, But we didn't really see that the infodemic did creep in, because you can't just stop that with MIQ at the borders.
And the last question, I guess, and it's maybe an impossible question, is there a way out? Like, we were getting so many messages. We put a message on our Tell Me About It Instagram page asking our listeners about how they dealt with their friends going down a rabbit hole. And there were so many people who said it was impossible to argue with my friend. It was so draining. I mean, Michelle, you had so many messages, didn't you, from people who were just saying they had to cut off contact from people or block them. You know, is there something people can do in that situation? Is there a way out, Anka?
I'm really glad that you're asking that, because it's really important to think about what we are, how we interact. So I'm just quoting now from the many, from all the good research that's been done on that. So the best strategy, from my understanding, is you've got to differentiate between what you do online in a more public way and what you do in your private space. So online, you're not going to change someone's mind, and especially not by attacking them or telling them they're stupid or that they're wrong or that they're conspiracy theorists. What you should always do, though, if you see someone posting something that's clearly not untrue, or where they're spreading misinformation, actually post a link or a debunk, or just say that's not correct, because there are always others watching you who are following you or who think that you've got it right, but maybe they're not quite sure. And then they go, oh, okay, Michelle's just said that's actually not true. We just report about it. And they go, okay, cool, I can believe Michelle here. So you're doing kind of public service by debunking stuff, but you're not going to win anyone over. I mean, the ones you're going against, you're not going to win them over online in Facebook debates. So save your energy for those who really matter of your friends, and that might just be a very small group, and because it requires a lot of energy. And again, you can't even do it in messaging. I think you have to sit down together and go for a walk, or at least have a call, maybe voice messages, but not just in a written form. You have to take the time where you actually almost go down the rabbit hole with them and try and understand why they're there, and have compassion for that. And then maybe ask some question at the right point, where you can offer something like, well, what would make you think differently about what would help you to believe that Pfizer is not out to kill us? What would you need from someone? Or so, you really actively try and come in and help them, steer them, but in the right direction, but mostly actually not direct them so much, but actually just understand and listen and have compassion, because in the end, it's very similar to someone being an account, okay? You're not going to reach them by telling them that their guru is dodgy and an abuser and they're crazy and it's just completely batshit what they believe in. The only thing that helps is that you hold out a hand to them. You say, hey, I still love you. I don't agree with what you're into. I don't think it's the right thing for me, but I still love you and I'm here. Because the time will come, and I think especially now after, all these people returning from the protests, the time will come where people are going to come out of this, hopefully, again. And they will need people who haven't mocked them and who still stand there and say, yeah, I get that. This was, wow, you were on something crazy there, but I still love you and I'm still here. So that compassion on the personal level is super important. But don't even try to do it publicly, do it one-on-one. That's the only thing that helps. And to be honest, I'm not really good at that. I just don't have enough patience. I'm too frustrated. I want to be right. I want to tell them they're wrong. So this is probably why I've been channeling. So yeah, but that's probably why I've been channeling.
I was just listening to you, Anka, thinking, oh, you're the nicest person in the world that you're doing this for your friends, like just taking them for lovely walks and like listening to them. Yeah.
I was just thinking about all the memes I've been posting about the protests. Like, oh God. I'm not compassionate.
I have to be honest, guys, it's actually, I advise you to do that, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing that, because like I said, I'm pretty hopeless at it. I just get too frustrated. So I channel all my energy more into empowering others that they can do that, and setting up these groups and thinking about media campaigns and all of that, because I've got to do something, but I'm often too impatient with the one-on-one. But I just admire everyone who can do it, and it's so needed. So yeah, we need more people out there doing the compassionate thing and talking one-on-one to each other.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today, Anka. When's your book out? When are we going to be able to read your book?
Oh, Well, it's not going to be until November, but I hope it's going to be an eye-opener about cuts in Aotearoa.
We're so excited. You can come back on and talk about that too, hopefully.
I would love to.
If you want to.
Thanks for all the good work you do. I'd love to. Thanks for all
so
this,
much.
guys.
Thanks for being here.
Bye, Anka.
Bye, Anka.
And that was Anka Richter, a cult journalist and researcher. Look, I don't know about you. I actually feel surprisingly better after hearing Anka talk about that. I think for me, it helps, I think, to understand some of the reasons that, like she says, good people would, fall into this and be captured in this sort of hinaki of misinformation. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I think what she said, the most interesting part for me was about the line between like victim and perpetrator. Like at what point does someone go so deep down the rabbit hole and like begin to profit off it? And like at what point are they part of the machine rather than just falling prey to it? And I think particularly when I was doing that influencer story, that's what I found really difficult. It's like at what point is it like a knowing thing that they're doing harm? And because also the thing is that you have to remember is that these people genuinely believe this stuff. Like some of them genuinely believe that the government is like out there killing kids. And so that's like very sad, and I think you do have to have compassion for them at the same time as being like you are harming others with your behaviour. Like it's a really complex thing to be able to hold. And I think what Anka said about compassion is like it's kind of the only way forward, right?
Yeah, I thought that too. And you know what struck me, I think we were all laughing about it, was how hard work it is, to actually engage with this stuff and engage with the people we love who hold these beliefs that in some cases are super disturbing, as you say, Kirsty, and really destructive, So it sounds like it's kind of, you can't just send a text message or post something on Instagram and think, oh, there you go, I've changed someone's mind. And you might already know that, Michelle, from, those conversations you're having with your friends, but they sound exhausting as well. So you have my sympathy there.
Yeah, I really did think I should go round to their houses, the two friends in particular who I've known for years, and have a proper conversation with them about it. But then I was like, I was like, why am I having to do that?
Yeah, but also you need to look after yourself. Like that's a key point as well. Like you shouldn't do it to your own detriment because like we are in a really challenging time. Like there's a pandemic, there's a war. I think it's okay. You don't have to shoulder that entire burden yourself, mate.
Especially when you were down at the riots
friend.
A couple of weeks ago. Grim.
Just chill out. Everyone just chill out. Although in saying that, I think something that Anka was pointing out is that like all of us are so, like in New Zealand particularly, we're so complacent about this stuff. I was thinking, will anything actually change? Like will people start to realise that misinformation is like a threat? Because, even after we had March 15 in Christchurch, like people didn't take this stuff seriously, for all of the kind of research and chat about how Instagram and Facebook are like at the nexus of this misinformation war, we've still got like the Prime Minister doing Facebook Live events. And like Anka said, she felt hypocritical for using Facebook for their, anti-misinformation group. It's just like impossible to know what's going to happen.
And that's enraging. I mean, I know what we're all saying about personal responsibility, and for sure, but when you still have these incredibly powerful, they're like global platforms who are essentially doing the bare minimum, if that, after the fact, then, that is something that makes me feel hopeless. Like I want some sort of sweeping change there. I want someone who'll come along and bring that under control, because I think you need both.
Yeah, that's so true, Noelle. I totally agree. And I think that we cannot actually underplay the fact that what happened in the last sort of 3 weeks with the occupation of Parliament, and the Anna Fifield, the Dominion Post editor, said this really well on Twitter, is that it was actually an assault on democracy and on the Fourth Estate. And just because the fires are out now, that doesn't mean that we can be complacent, because this is going to continue, and those people are going to go home to their communities and be spreading those ideas further. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how we contend with that. Anyone got the answer?
You keep doing your jobs. You know, I think that's what you do. Like Anka called it an infodemic, which I hadn't heard that phrase before. Maybe you've heard it before, Kirsty or Michelle, but I hadn't. And I think
they call it like the information war and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I know Michelle and I will probably both keep working on this, but in saying that, it is exhausting. Like when I was following those influencers, it literally started to mess with my mind, watching these people kind of living in an alternate reality, and also just pushing ideas that are so harmful. Like so much of what they propagate is all these ideas about natural immunity and your body can do it, and if you take that further along the path, it ends up literally as social Darwinism, which is the thing that underpins eugenics and Nazism.
And Nazism, yeah.
It just begins to melt your mind.
You have to be careful. I hope you're taking breaks as well. I mean, says mum here, but that sounds awful, Kirsty.
Well, I unfollowed them all, so
good. Yeah.
What about you, Michelle? I know you've really struggled with it as well.
Oh, look, it just wears you down, I think. You know, every time I write a story about misinformation or COVID, anti-COVID myths or that kind of thing, I get, hundreds of emails or, that people attacking on social media, that kind of thing. And you can ignore it. You've got to have a thick skin as a journalist to an extent. But yeah, I mean, it's not a fun time. And especially at that protest, the minute I went there were people oh, you're the mainstream media, tell the truth, just abuse that I've never experienced. It's more that it just makes you feel like it's hard to sleep at night.
Well, thank you both for doing your work and for coming in and talking about this today. We're going to talk about something a bit more uplifting next week, actually, I think.
Oh, well, you know what, Noelle? We're actually going to be here every week.
Yes,
talking
we are.
I love that you thanked us for coming in. Thank you for doing
Thank you. Because I know it's been a busy,
you for coming
busy
into
times.
your wardrobe at home.
How's the wardrobe,
While
Kirsty?
sheltering.
You're sheltering in place.
Wardrobe's bloody great. You know what? My neighbours have got Omicron. So all the kids are at home, and I don't know if you guys could hear, but they were in their pool shouting whilst we were recording, which is just new ambience for the listeners.
Yeah, well, it's better than a plane, which is usually what's in the background when you're talking, because both of you now live in a flight path.
I've had to use my husband's computer today, and his messages keep popping up from his workmates and his Slack channel.
Delighted to hear that John's so popular.
I think he needs to do some work, I think, by the looks of some of them, but he's busy with our child, so sorry.
We'll see you next week. We're back. Who's our guest next week?
Actually, next week, yes, we have Sienna Yates, who is going to be talking about women's magazines.
Total change of pace, total change of scene. We're looking forward to it. We'll see you next week. Matiwa. Tell Me About It is made for Stuff by Bird of Paradise Productions. It was produced by me, Noelle McCarthy, and written by me, Kirsty Johnston, and Michelle Duff. Our script supervisor is Eugene Bingham, and thanks to Janine Fenwick and Eugene for editorial oversight. Mixed by Mark Chesterman. And our theme tune is Queenie Queenie by Tammy Nielsen, our queen. You can like the podcast and leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell Me About It is made possible by funding from New Zealand On Air.
Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Queenie, Queenie, don't drop the ball. Down come baby, cradling on.